some of these manifestations display clear levels of intelligence. We're not dealing with random forces of nature here. This is not idle speculation or wild science fiction. Ghosts have been with humanity since the dawn of civilization. We want to know what becomes of us, and this phenomenon may answer that question more than anything else in our society.
My name is Christopher Lewis, and I've been a filmmaker now for over 30 years. And in that time, I've focused my camera on some pretty interesting subjects, but none of them have been as fascinating as the subject of ghosts. And people always ask me, have you ever seen a ghost? What are they like, and are they dangerous? Well, my answer to that question is go find out for yourself. And that's exactly what we're about to do now, as we go in search of America's haunted places. We begin at the Myrtles plantation in St. Francisville, Louisiana. Although I have never knowingly come face to face with a ghost, this is where I probably came the closest. The Myrtles is said to be the 13th most haunted house in America, and on the evening I spent there, I found out why. I was staying in the upstairs bedroom said to be where two young sisters were murdered in the 1800s. And each time I closed the window shade that night, it would mysteriously open while my back was turned. When I finally just left it open, once I turned away again, the shade closed by itself. Photographers often report that their batteries drain quickly and their lights don't work when ghosts are supposedly present. While interviewing Hester Eby about her otherworldly experiences here, a fully charged battery that should have lasted well over an hour drained in less than 5 minutes.
One of the most vexing problems facing parapsychologists, paranormal investigators, is that the phenomena is extremely uncooperative. Perhaps best described as evasive and elusive in nature. If you set your equipment up in one place in the house or the room, it occurs in another. If you show up with the right equipment, it turns your equipment off.
In 1991, when we were interviewing Toots Malloy about the ghost of Steamboat Captain Mary Green, we also experienced electrical problems at a very interesting moment.
Mary Becker Green was the wife of Gordon C. Green, who began Delta Queens.
Never mind.
Was it something I said?
No, I don't think
It was Mary.
The Waverly Plantation house near West Point, Mississippi, is said to contain convincing proof that supernatural entities actually do exist. We went there to document the existence of Little Girl Lost, the apparition of a young girl who was thought to have died in the antebellum mansion during the Civil War. Some say she choked to death on the spiral staircase. Others that she might have died in the bedroom where she is most often seen. As we interviewed one eyewitness, Cindy Snow, our lights here too quit each time the tiny spirit was mentioned.
And she had a younger sister as well. While they were staying here at the mansion, the oldest daughter died, and the lights did too. She had been coming downstairs through the hallway to go upstairs to bed. I would love to be able to make her present when I wanted to because I enjoyed seeing her.
One thing we can say for sure is that this phenomena is perhaps the most elusive type of manifestation known on Earth because it almost never directly cooperates with people who are investigating it. And when it does, it all too often inhibits them from documenting its presence, almost as if it doesn't want to be formally acknowledged.
So how do we know if the things we experience are truly supernatural occurrences or simply coincidence? For these answers, many people turn to mediums, unusually psychic people who seem to have a gift for communicating with the spirit world. Since we wanted to know the true identity of the little spirit so frequently seen at Waverly, we invited Cindy Snow and her father to join a young medium by the name of David Boone. we asked David to conduct a seance in the room where the little spirit is most frequently seen. David instructed us to collect a glass punch bowl full of water, a cork and a needle, and bring them to the seance.
When I do this, I don't bring anything with me. I want everything to be from the house, from the area, preferably from the room or from the area where the spirit has been.
David had written the alphabet and numbers in a circle on a plain brown shopping bag and inserted a needle into the end of the cork as a pointer. If the spirit chose to speak, it would speak through the pointer.
Well, would y'all care to join hands for a moment?
Sure.
I'm here at the invitation of the Snows. They live here with you and they wish to know more about you, to understand you, and to help you if at all possible. Can you please give us an age? If you can, would you please point first to the Y to indicate a yes, and then move on to the age?
Looks like it's looking at 4.
It seems to have stopped.
I think it stopped on 4. It's just about the age, yeah. If you could ask her if she died in this room, if she was in this room when she died.
They wish to know if it was in this room that you died. Please answer yes or no.
This time the needle moves to the letter N. Is she telling us no?
This may have been her sick room, but it was not her death room.
If David Boone has indeed contacted the little girl lost, she seems to have told him that she did not die in the bed where she so often appears.
There is no hard or substantial evidence to suggest that people can directly or perhaps even indirectly communicate with spirits.
Ask her if she had a sister, if she had a younger sister.
T is also 5. Dear child, you indicated earlier that you thought you were 4. Could you be trying to tell us that you had an older sister with you? I would ask that you indicate either yes or no to them.
Sometimes the messages we receive are unclear, either because of distractions, an unwillingness of the spirit to communicate, or maybe a spirit just can't answer the questions we put to it.
To begin with, I would say to you that a 4-year-old girl who is going through such efforts as this to be in contact with you is not a threat in any way to you. But no, she is not at peace. She hurts. She is in pain. She made that very clear to me earlier tonight. She is aware of the occupants of this house, which means that she would have to have some indication of the time that has passed, of the changes that have gone on. I'm sure she understands on some level that she is not here as she used to be. She was separated from her family during the war. She has nowhere to return to. All her people, as she knew them, are gone. All the people she knew are gone. Only the house remains, and the people who come into the house and successively become her foster families.
Did David Boone actually talk to the little spirit seen at Waverly? Did she really answer the questions we put to her? Well, I couldn't tell for sure, but David felt she did, and he feels that she will be paying more visits to Waverly House in the future.
When people perceive a ghost, an apparition, Are they seeing the ghost with their eyes? Meaning, is there light being emitted from the apparition, which comes into their pupil, which hits the retina, which goes to the optic nerve, which goes to the occipital lobe of the brain? Or is the phenomena directly somehow provoking or stimulating the brain of the observer to impose the image on it? We don't know.
The battlefields of the American Civil War are some of the most haunted places on earth. No wonder with so much horror and bloodshed concentrated there. But the real ghost hunter will tell you that some battlefields seem a lot more haunted than others. Gettysburg in Pennsylvania is considered by some to be the most haunted Civil War battlefield. This was the site of the war's largest and bloodiest battle, where in 1863, General Robert E. Lee's Confederate Army invaded the North, hoping to end the war with a crushing blow to the Union Army. But it was not to be. The Confederate Army's retreat from Gettysburg was one of the bleakest moments of the war. Author Keith Toney feels that those soldiers may still be retreating up Seminary Ridge.
You never know where a story is going to pop up from when you start researching. And my wife came to me and said, I had an experience in Gettysburg that I never told you about. And as she started relating the story to me, it took place on July 5th. She remembered the date very well because the 4th was over. All the crowds had left town. It was a warm night, being July. So she stopped by the screen door and opened it to get a breath of air. And as she stood there, she started hearing something. And it sounded like a creaking, kind of a groaning sound. So she stepped out in the yard to see what was creating this noise. And she looked up towards the seminary, towards Seminary Ridge, where the sound seemed to be coming from. As she stood there watching, she could see a line of wagons going across the seminary and turning down the road, down the Fairfield Road. And she began hearing groans and sounds of agony coming from these wagons. And within a couple of seconds, she realized that what she was seeing was Lee's retreat from Gettysburg. Finally, she discussed it with a friend of hers who was a ranger at Gettysburg, and he told her that in fact she was not the first one to have witnessed this, that other people had had the exact same experience.
Our body is suddenly brought to a halt, violently brought to a halt when we don't expect it. We, our soul, our spirit, our consciousness, keeps going, and it suddenly finds itself in an environment that's totally alien to it, and it can no longer re-enter the capsule or the container in which it resided.
We've found that many ghost hunters feel that Sachs Covered Bridge may be a magnet for Gettysburg ghosts. Members of the International Ghost Hunters Society recently traveled here hoping to capture images of spirits to post on their website. They feel a scientific approach may yield irrefutable proof that ghosts really do exist. Armed with detecting devices and digital cameras, they made their pilgrimage under the cloak of darkness, when spirits are thought to be more willing to show themselves.
Apparently it was 2 Confederate soldiers who were hung here, as well as some battles that took place right around here. And it just, for some reason, appears to be haunted. And whenever you come here, you can usually get, somebody will capture something on film. The big thing ahead was right in here in the rafters. Cool. When I first turned on, it was moving along the left-hand side.
Every now and then I'll catch a little flash up in the rafters, like something's kind of darting in and out.
Well, that's kind of spooky, doesn't it?
Yeah, that it does. And I usually see them like kind of hover over some people in groups, like kind of like they're listening in, seeing what's going on.
Okay, when you use regular night vision, you can't see anything. When you use it with infrared to illuminate, and you pass the infrared beam across a spirit normally, it actually paints it white, or it glows. And then by glowing, you then become visible through the night vision. And there are times when certain places you've gone, I've seen over a dozen floating spheres or orbs.
Sure, this is one variation of an EMF meter, or an electromagnetic field detector. Ghosts are perceived as being electromagnetic in origin. It's one of the ways that they're capable of manipulating our physical environment, and we're able to detect them with these detectors, of course, when they do generate these electromagnetic fields.
One possibility is that the phenomena itself, the ghost, the poltergeist, whatever you wish to call it, somehow is generating its own magnetic field, which is sensed by the milligauss detector, which is a magnetometer, senses magnetic fields in the thousandth of a Gauss. The other possibility is that this phenomena's presence disrupts or modifies or alters the Earth's geomagnetic field, or the ambient magnetic field from various devices that exist all around our planet. And we're sensing this disruption or interference.
Just seeing if there's any around here. I'm not picking up nothing.
There's too many people for a good reading with this. Spirits tend to shy away from large groups. And they just, they don't come around.
39, 45, 40, 43.
I know they've had positive results here in the past. Personally, tonight I haven't had any electromagnetic field detections, but I've been snapping pictures the whole night long.
Voice phenomenon.
Although magnetic devices weren't revealing ghost presence on Sachs-covered bridge this evening, one couple felt they might have captured the sound of a spirit.
Well, it sounds like, oh my gosh, but it's whispered. This is still
There's that weird noise.
That river's got a strong current.
There's a weird kind of like high-pitched noise, and there was no high-pitched noise at the time.
there. Stop it, rewind it. Stop.
Got a strong current.
You have to listen very closely.
Whisper. Yes.
Yeah.
There was that weird noise in the back too, the high-pitched noise. I don't know what that was. That's all we got on
We
there.
first thought that was a bus backing up,
but
that just
that
goes on
doesn't
too
back
long.
up that long, like that noise.
I certainly don't disbelieve.
I do.
That river's got a strong current.
There are numerous instances throughout the United States and the rest of the world where violent battles have occurred, and there have been numerous sightings and encounters between observers and apparitions, balls of light, spectral forms.
It's not rewinding.
Is it off?
Any ghost hunters will tell you when
No, it's
spirits
not
don't
moving.
want to be detected, they are not above sabotaging electrical equipment.
Sometimes they say when there's presence, you know, it stops batteries.
I've heard something like that, yeah, but I don't know what I've got here. I don't know whether I just put it in wrong or whether actually it's being stopped. I don't know. It won't rewind.
It's simply the pranks pulled by a young, a young ghost that loves to play practical jokes. Until you have your own personal experience with the paranormal, you really won't know for yourself. And that's what we try to do with members of the International Ghost Hunter Society, is to teach each of them how to go about doing it for themselves, so they can verify that there is life after death. They can verify they can capture ghostly images on film.
You feel kind of lucky when you do get them, anxious as you go through the photos, but it's a real treat when you do get one.
Did the ghost hunters on Sachs-covered bridge truly record the spirits of Gettysburg's past this night? Or did atmospheric conditions and digital optics conspire to produce illusions of those fallen comrades? When it comes to ghosts, You have to judge for yourself. Hollywood is a favorite locale for ghost stories. The spirits of the rich and the famous seem to stick around Tinseltown, probably because it's hard for them to leave their celebrity status behind. Of all the Hollywood hauntings, my favorite is that of a little-known ghost of a television icon.
The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, starring the entire Nelson family. Here's Ozzie. Here's Harriet. Here's David.
The house that Ozzie and Harriet Nelson lived in for more than 25 years is still purported to be haunted by Ozzie. Besides the usual goings-on, footsteps, lights and faucets turning on and off, sometimes the water in the swimming pool shoots straight up into the air. Besides all of that stuff, the female residents of the house have been quite disturbed to be awakened in the middle of the night, to feel invisible hands pulling back their covers, someone nuzzling at their neck, and taking certain liberties with them.
Ozzie was a very unique man, a very high-energy man, very health-oriented man, for what we know. And he was cut down by cancer at a relatively young age. And perhaps the thought of being destroyed by something he really hated and he thought he would never get was so traumatizing to him that he's trying to sort of compensate for that by being very youthful or energetic.
You mean there were other girls before me?
Oh, hundreds of them.
Oh, this is very interesting. Tell me more.
Saved by the Bell.
Either Ozzie had that alpaca sweater buttoned too tight all those years, or his ghost is a little frisky. The house was not haunted prior to Ozzie's death, and it is haunted now. So is the sound stage where they shot The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet. I think he's still going to work and coming home every day.
We're assuming that the phenomena caused at Ozzie's house is caused by him. And you know, there's good reason to suspect that in some haunted environments, even though only one person may have died there or been bonded there, that other spirits, ghosts, may be present or join that ghost there. There have been people claim this, they've reported over the years, and it makes one wonder as to whether we're looking at this thing in a too much of a linear fashion, too much of a human fashion. We're trying to assume that ghosts act and behave like we do.
The Grande Dame of American riverboats, the legendary Delta Queen is the oldest surviving overnight steamer still plying American waters. And inside her classic exterior, she seems to be harboring a ghost.
There have been groups come aboard with their instruments to test the boat for ghost presence, and all of them seem to confirm that Mary Becker Green is on board.
Mary Becker Green was the first woman ever licensed to pilot a steamboat in America. She commanded a series of steamers during an era when the Mississippi was choking with river traffic and steamboats were the way to travel. At the time, she and her husband operated the Green Line, considered one of the country's most reliable steamboat companies. But by 1946, Mary Green was nearing 80. She was a widow who lived out her years in her private stateroom aboard the Delta Queen.
She belonged to a very strict ladies' social club that looked down upon drinking, and so she would not allow any alcohol to be served on the Delta Queen. Mary Green passed away on board in the late 1940s, and about a week after she passed away, construction began on the Mark Twain Saloon, the first bar to be built on the boat since the Greens owned it. About 3 or 4 days after the bar opened, the Delta Queen was hit by a little towboat. And wouldn't you know, it hit the boat right there where the bar was located, broke in the bulkhead, and they had to close the bar down for repairs. True story, the name of that little boat that hit the Delta Queen was the Mary B. And her name was Mary Becker Green. It sort of makes you wonder.
Mary Green was a teetotaler. She may have had some, emotional, obsession. Today call it OCD, where she couldn't stand the people becoming inebriated and drunk. And the very notion of that being displayed in the environment that she once called hers is so traumatizing to whatever of her is left that it reacts. It'd be like if, you died and you saw your child being abused. Well, wouldn't you want to respond out of the tremendous, I guess, hatred and anxiety produced within you? I think you would.
There are other indications that Mary Green may still be roaming her beloved steamboat. A crewman who was staying in her former cabin one night reported waking up in a cold sweat and seeing a cloaked woman standing beside him.
As soon as he spoke to her, she just disappeared.
Several days later, he saw the presence again.
And so this time, instead of saying anything, not that he wasn't afraid, but instead of saying anything, he just turned the light on. And when he turned the light on, every light bulb in the room blew.
Another time, she manifested to a couple who were drinking in her old cabin.
They said while they were talking that all of a sudden her water pitcher just lifted up in the air and smashed against the mirror.
There's the possibility that the presence of these paranormal forces may somehow alter gravitational fields, magnetic fields, and electric fields in such a way that the mass and the inertia of these objects may be altered to such a degree that very small levels of energy can impart tremendous movement to these objects.
Others have seen the spirit as well, almost always after midnight, when most of the passengers have gone to bed. It usually appears in the stateroom where Mary Green died.
The experts who have come on have said that she is definitely there, but she doesn't know why. She seems to be in an in-between stage.
Is the ghost of America's first woman steamboat captain really haunting the Delta Queen? Or is this just another tall tale of the river? Why not spend a night aboard the historic steamboat? If you roam her hallways late at night, you may just find out for yourself.
People are incredibly curious as to what this phenomenon represents. Is it an extension of the human psyche? Does it mean that we survive the trauma of physical death? Does it mean that something unique about us stays in the physical world after our body rots and decays over time? And I think it is probably one of the most perplexing questions, a question that perhaps even drives the essence of most religions on this planet.
We continue our search now for America's haunted places in the mountains of East Tennessee. It was here during the last century that a group of English settlers had a plan. They wanted to build a utopian society far from the pollution of the cities where men could prosper and be free. Well, today, all that's left of that grand plan is a quaint little Victorian village by the name of Rugby, a place where they say the spirits of those settlers still linger. Rugby was the brainchild of Thomas Hughes, a British social activist and the author of Tom Brown's School Days, who in 1880 led his followers across the ocean and to the top of the beautiful Cumberland Plateau in Tennessee. Here he would conduct his grand experiment in a community he named Rugby. With the help of a few locals and the promise that the railroad would soon connect Rugby with the rest of the world, the optimistic colony began the task of building a paradise. And for one brief moment, it shone brightly.
It was intended initially for younger sons of gentry as an opportunity for them to work with their hands. That was socially unacceptable in England. And it was also a place for families to come that wanted to have small farms. But more than anything, it was the focus of the desire for cooperative enterprise and a one-for-all kind of atmosphere. But cultured. They wanted to, Thomas Hughes in particular, the founder, wanted people to work like peasants during the day and be able to have a life of culture in the evening. What went wrong, though, with the original utopian dreams was a combination of terrible weather the first year they were here, the worst winter in a quarter of a century, a drought the next summer that ruined all the crops that they had planted, a typhoid epidemic that broke out right at the tail end of the drought, and 7 settlers died from it. And of course there was panic and many left and went to other places in America.
Many, but perhaps not all. For over the years, there have been persistent rumors that several of the original settlers never moved on. There's an active spirit that appears regularly to female guests in room number 2 of Newberry House, one of Rugby's original hotels. The apparition is thought to be that of an engineer named Charles Oldfield.
Well, I've talked to several women who have experienced something at night in room 2 at Newberry, and apparently it is possibly the ghost of Mr. Oldfield, and he's leaning over their bed, and both of them said that they weren't afraid, and that the sense of it was of a man in dark clothing, but also a very strong feeling of sadness. I think in both cases, both ladies stayed on the night there, and they were both alone. This doesn't happen when it's a couple in the bedroom. He was sent by the British board over in London, who was trying to essentially manage the colony from across the ocean, to come and be a kind of a spy, if you will. I don't think they used that term, but he did have a secret code that he would telegraph them or mail back to England to help to explain to them what was going on in the colony. He didn't have any intent when he came here to stay. He was just going to do his job and leave, but he fell in love with the place, and he became convinced that he wanted to be a permanent colonist. So he started writing his wife, telling her what a beautiful place this was and how nice the people were and what a struggle they were having and how much he felt that they should be able to succeed and that he wanted to stay and help. So he tried to convince her that she should come to America and join him.
My dear wife, I do long for you so, and pray for the day you will join me here in these beautiful environs.
But it was apparently not to be. Before his wife could come to America, Charles Oldfield was stricken with kidney failure and lay dying in room number 2 at Newberry House.
I can imagine it being a very touching and very sad thing. He was calling for his wife at the last.
My son.
Finally, his son was sent to join him, his teenage son. And he got here on the very week that his father, Mr. Oldfield, lay dying in a room at Newberry House, at the original boarding house. And so he got here just in time to be at his bedside when he passed away. Maybe since his wife couldn't join him, and he was so sad to be separated from her at his death, that has carried over into this century. Maybe he's missing his wife and wishing that she could have been with him when he was dying.
There are many reasons why ghosts haunt certain environments. One of the reasons is they died there. Another reason is there's a strong emotional bond to a certain place, locale, or object or objects remaining in an environment that were at an earlier time located in an environment around these people. And there have been numerous cases documented that strongly suggest this as a possibility. This suggests an object being haunted as opposed to a place. You move the object and the phenomenon moves along with the object.
One last stop now in Victorian Rugby to visit the motherly spirit of Sophie Tyson, who is said to inhabit the town's most haunted home, the Rosalind Mansion.
The Tyson family lived in this house back in the 1880s. Sophie, the daughter, is apparently the ghostly figure. The way it usually happens is someone is asleep upstairs and they hear footsteps. In several cases that I know about, the person would come to the head of the tall stairs there and look down and hear the sound much stronger and see this pale vision of a woman walking up and down the hallway just like you would pace, crying. And one person said that she was carrying a baby. Others that have reported seeing her through one of these long windows here have described the woman that is in a historic picture that we have in our archives of the Tyson family. And it's unmistakably a description of her. It's hard to know what a young woman might be that heartbroken about that so many people would experience in later decades the sense and sound and sight of her like that. This is a hot spot. It is a place where the spirit world manifests itself very strongly. One of the reasons has to be, how many places are there in America that so much of the fabric and original furnishings and so forth of an entire community is still there? And that's one of the things that sets Rugby so apart.
Or maybe when our bodies are abruptly halted in an unexpected fashion, we, our consciousness, our soul, our spirit, we keep going. And maybe that's what ghosts are.
We take you now near the oil fields of Oklahoma, just west of Tulsa, for the fascinating story of the spirit of Thomas Gilchrist. Now, Thomas Gilchrist was a turn-of-the-century oilman who people say was so obsessed with the art that he collected during his lifetime that he's currently roaming the halls of his home, keeping a watchful eye on it all. Thomas Gilchrist invested his entire fortune in art and built a remarkable museum to house it all here in the hills overlooking old Indian territory. This was a place, says Tulsa historian Robert Powers, that had a spiritual attraction for Thomas Gilchrist during his lifetime and still may today.
Mr. Gilchrist had sort of a spiritual connection with this piece of land. We often have people who have New Age sort of spiritual connections come up and say that they do feel powers emanating from this particular hillside. Whether that's the case or not, I'm not sure, but they say they can feel something.
William Thomas Gilchrist was born in Louisiana in 1890, the first of 14 children. His father was Scotch-Irish, his mother one-quarter Creek Indian. That Native American heritage allowed her to live free anywhere in the Creek Nation of eastern Oklahoma. So, shortly after Thomas Gilchrist was born, the family moved into what was then Indian Territory. By 1899, the Creek Nation was being divided into private land, and by a lucky chance of fate, Thomas Gilchrist received his allotment of 160 acres located just 4 miles from what was then the original oil well in what would become Oklahoma's first major oil field, the Glen Pool. Before long, his land had 32 oil wells sitting on it, pouring out wealth that made him a millionaire before he was 20. Oil dividends allowed Thomas Gilchrist to begin his art collecting early. By the time he was 22, he had bought his first painting from an art dealer in Tulsa, a simple painting by Ridgway Knight called Rural Courtship. It was the start of a passion that would one day turn into an obsession. Gilchrist once admitted that to become a great collector, one must be a great spender. And he was now sinking his entire fortune into paintings, documents, sculpture, and rare books, anything that told the cultural history of the American Indian. To house his ever-expanding collection, he began construction on a grand museum building located just a stone's throw from his modest sandstone home. Shaped like an Indian longhouse and built by Indian labor with stone cut from the nearby Osage Hills, his art and the building that housed it were now Thomas Gilchrist's spiritual obsession.
The David Milston book on Mr. Gilchrist's life, possibly the most interesting thing that he wrote about was how Mr. Gilchrist would stop his car and sit for an hour just to listen to a mockingbird because he felt at one with nature and he felt the mockingbird's call was something, once again, very spiritual. When Mr. Gilchrist died, while he was a leader within the community, his funeral did not take place at like the First Presbyterian Church, where one would expect. It was held in the front yard of the house. It was conducted in the Creek language, and at the end of it, archers shot arrows off to the 4 directions to release his spirit. Mr. Gilchrist felt so intensely about the nature of this spot of ground, of the sort of rise in the Osage Hills, that he did commission before his death a mausoleum to be built. And the mausoleum houses Mr. Gilchrist and his mother and father. He was very cosmic about this spot. We have had people go through the house who were supposedly spiritualists and say, I feel this and I feel that. But there are also people who come up here and say that there's some sort of spiritual connection that occurs on top of this hill. Just like the people who come out to the facility and stand in the front yard and say they sense something about the ground, spiritualists will come into the house and they say they sense something about the house. Have had this happen on more than one occasion. They say they feel cold spots, they say they feel drafts, they say they feel any number of things, when supposedly they didn't have any knowledge of what was happening here, but they all got to that spot in the stairs and said, I feel something here. And since that time, various and sundry people, either living here or working here, have seen something that they swear is the ghost of Mr. Gilchrist. After Mr. Gilchrist's death, the Rossi family lived here. Mr. Rossi was a director of the museum. His son, Mark Rossi, told me the story of about a puppeteer who was visiting the museum and was staying in one of the upstairs bedrooms. He was coming downstairs to the dining room for a family meal, and as he was coming downstairs, he passed a gentleman wearing khaki pants and an old sort of rumpled hat on the stairway. The puppeteer nodded at the man nodded back. The puppeteer came down, went into the dining room. Family started to eat. The puppeteer said, well, aren't we going to wait for our other guest? And the family said, what other guest? We don't have anyone else in the house.
And then there's the story that I've heard from several reliable sources, and I believe it. It happened several years ago during the weekend when the Thomas Gilchrist house was locked up and the burglar alarm was set. Well, sometime during the weekend, the police got notification that there was an intruder here. So they sent a canine unit right up to the front of the house, and the officer came up, unlocked the front door, and sent the dog in. Well, the dog started barking and ran across the foyer, ran up to the staircase, and came up to the staircase just about this far on the landing, and it stopped absolutely still. And its barking changed from barking to a growl, and it's cowered down, and the hair started coming up on the back of the dog's neck, and the dog wouldn't go any further. Well, the policeman said, go boy, get the intruder. The dog absolutely wouldn't move. So ever since that time, people have speculated that it was the ghost of Thomas Gilchrist up there saying, no boy, no further.
And I, for one, believe that some of these manifestations display clear levels of intelligence. We're not dealing with random forces of nature here, not most of the time, and we're not dealing with energy that just happens to be present when you're there, and we're misinterpreting its effect on the environment.
An employee at the museum said she was working upstairs with a volunteer. Downstairs doors were locked. Had to come downstairs to get something. At the point in the bend in the stairs, she saw this man coming up. He was wearing rumpled khaki pants and sort of this rumpled hat. She nodded at him, he nodded at her. She came downstairs, got what she needed, went back upstairs and asked the volunteer, where's the old man that was on the stairs? And the volunteer went, what old man? And of course they found no one.
We're looking at a force of nature that could supply endless amounts of power for humanity into the foreseeable future. This is not idle speculation or wild science fiction. This phenomena produces forces that directly affect the physical world we live in. If we ever come to understand them, it may dramatically and forever change the way in which we live our lives.
Well, there you have it. A look at some of our favorite haunted places. Stories that we've investigated over the years. What do you think? Are there ghosts out there? Well, that's a debate that's going to rage long after you and I are in the spirit world. But I hope we've piqued your curiosity, and you'll go on a ghost hunt of your own. Only then will you know for sure whether ghosts really do exist. Thanks for watching.